But they weren't.
There is another silence as Steve looks toward the crowd and then toward Tommy. He wears a tight grin.
Well, I guess what we better do then is run a check on the neighborhood and see which ones of us are really human.
There is laughter at this, but it's a laughter that comes from a desperate attempt to lighten the atmosphere. The people look at one another in the middle of their laughter.
I wonder if Floral Street's got the same deal we got. Where is Pete Van Horn anyway? Isn't he back yet?
Suddenly, there is the sound of a car's engine starting to turn over. We look across the street toward the driveway of Les Goodman's house. He is at the wheel, trying to start the car.
Can you get started, Les?
Les Goodman gets out of the car, shaking his head.
No dice.
He walks toward the group. He stops suddenly as, behind him, the car engine starts up all by itself. Les whirls around to stare at the car. The car idles roughly, smoke coming from the exhaust, the frame shaking gently. Les's eyes go wide, and he runs over to his car. The people stare at the car.
He got the car started somehow. He got his car started.
The people continue to stare, caught up by this revelation, and wildly frightened.
How come his car just up and started like that? All by itself. He wasn't anywhere near it. It started all by itself.
Don Martin approaches the group and stops a few feet away to look toward Les's car.
He never did come up to look at that thing that flew overhead. He wasn't even interested. Why? Why didn't he come out with the rest of us to look? He always was an oddball. Him and his whole family. Real oddball. What do you say we ask him?
The group starts toward the house. In this brief fraction of a moment, it takes the first step toward changing from a group into a mob. The group members begin to head purposefully across the street toward the house. Steve stands in front of them. For a moment, their fear almost turns their walk into a wild stampede, but Steve's voice, loud, incisive, and commanding, makes them stop.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Let's not be a mob.
The people stop, pause for a moment, and then, much more quietly and slowly, start to walk across the street. Les stands alone, facing the people.
I just don't understand it. I tried to start it and it wouldn't start. You saw me. All of you saw me.
And now, just as suddenly as the engine started, it stops, and there is a long silence that is gradually intruded upon by the frightened murmuring of the people.
I don't understand, I swear. I don't understand. What's happening?
Maybe you better tell us. Nothing's working on this street. Nothing. No lights, no power, no radio. Nothing except one car. Yours.
The people's murmuring becomes a loud chant, filling the air with accusations and demands for action. Two of the men pass Don and head toward Les, who backs away from them against his car. He is cornered.
Wait a minute now. You keep your distance. All of you. So I've got a car that starts by itself. Well, that's a freak thing. I admit it. But does that make me a criminal or something? I don't know why that car works. It just does.
This stops the crowd momentarily, and Les, still backing away, goes toward his front porch. He goes up the steps and then stops, facing the mob.
What's it all about, Steve?
We're all in a monster kick, Les. Seems that the general impression holds that maybe one family isn't what we think they are. Monsters from outer space or something, different from us. Aliens from the vast beyond. You know anybody that might fit that description around here on Maple Street?
What is this? A gag? This is a practical joke or something?
The eyes of the crowd are cold and accusing.
Now that's supposed to incriminate me, huh? The car engine goes on and off, and that really does it, doesn't it? I just don't understand it. Any more than any of you do. Look, you all know me. We've lived here 5 years, right in this house. We're no different from any of the rest of you. We're no different at all. Really, this whole thing is just weird.
Well, if that's the case, Les Goodman, explain why.
Explain what?
Look, let's forget this.
Go ahead. Let her talk. What about it? Explain what?
Well, sometimes I go to bed late at night. A couple of times I'd come out here on the porch, and I'd see Mr. Goodman here in the wee hours of the morning standing out in front of his house, looking up at the sky. That's right, looking up at the sky as if he were waiting for something. As if he were looking for something.
She's crazy. Look, I can explain that. Please. I can really explain that. She's making it up anyway. I tell you, she's making it up.
He takes a step toward the crowd, and they back away from him. He walks down the steps after them, and they continue to back away. Suddenly, he is left completely alone, and he looks like a man caught in the middle of a menacing circle as the scene slowly fades to black. Act 2, Scene 1. Fade in on Maple Street at night. On the sidewalk, little knots of people stand around talking in low voices. At the end of each conversation, they look toward Les Goodman's house. From the various houses, we can see candlelight, but no electricity. The quiet that blankets the whole area is disturbed only by the almost whispered voices of the people standing around. In one group, Charlie stands staring across at the Goodman's house. Two men stand across the street from it in almost sentry-like poses.
It just doesn't seem right, though, keeping watch on them. Why, he was right when he said he was one of our neighbors. I've known Ethel Goodman ever since they moved in. We've been good friends.
That don't prove a thing. Any guy who'd spend his time looking up at the sky early in the morning, well, there's something wrong with that kind of person. There's something that ain't legitimate. Maybe under normal circumstances we could let it go by, but these aren't normal circumstances. Why, look at this street. Nothing but candles. Why, it's like going back into the Dark Ages or something.
Steve walks down the steps of his porch, down the street, to the Goodman's house, and then stops at the foot of the steps. Les is standing there. Ethel Goodman, behind him, is very frightened.
Just stay right where you are, Steve. We don't want any trouble. But this time, if anybody sets foot on my porch, that's what they're gonna get. Trouble.
Look, Les.
I've already explained to you people. I don't sleep very well at night sometimes. I get up and I take a walk and I look up at the sky. I look at the stars.
That's exactly what he does. Why, this whole thing it's some kind of madness or something.
That's exactly what it is. Some kind of madness.
You best watch who you're seen with, Steve. Until we get this all straightened out, you ain't exactly above suspicion yourself.
Or you, Charlie. Or any of us, it seems, from age 8 on up.
What I'd like to know is, what are we gonna do? Just stand around here all night?
There's nothing else we can do. One of them will tip their hand. They got to.
There's something you can do, Charlie. You can go home and keep your mouth shut. You can quit spreading around like a self-appointed judge, climb into bed, and forget it.
You sound real anxious to have that happen, Steve. I think we better keep our eye on you, too. I think everything might as well come out now. Your wife's done plenty of talking, Steve, about how odd you are. Go ahead. Tell us what she said.
Steve walks toward them from across the street.
Go ahead, what's my wife saying? Let's get it all out. Let's pick out every idiosyncrasy of every single man, woman, and child on the street. And then we might as well set up some kind of citizen's court. How about a firing squad at dawn, Charlie, so we can get rid of all the suspects? Narrow them down, make it easier for you.
There's no need getting so upset, Steve. It's just that, well, Myra's talked about how there's been plenty of nights you spent hours down in your basement working on some kind of radio or something. Well, none of us have ever seen that radio.
By this time, Steve has reached the group. He stands there defiantly.
Go ahead, Steve. What kind of radio set you working on? I've never seen it. Neither has anyone else. Who do you talk to on that radio set? And who talks to you?
I'm surprised at you, Charlie. How come you're so dense all of a sudden? Who do I talk to? I talk to monsters from outer space. I talk to 3-headed green men who fly over here and look like me.
ham radio set. A lot of people have them. I can show it to you. It's right down in the basement.
Show them nothing. If they want to look inside our house, let them go and get a search warrant.
Look, buddy, you can't afford to.
Charlie, don't start telling me who's dangerous and who isn't, and who's safe and who's a menace. And you're with them too, all of you. You're standing here all set to crucify, all set to find a scapegoat, all desperate to point some kind of a finger at a neighbor. Well, now look, friends, the only thing that's going to happen is that we'll eat each other up alive.
He stops abruptly as Charlie suddenly grabs his arm.
That's not the only thing that can happen to us.
Down the street, a figure has suddenly materialized in the gloom. In the silence, we hear the clickety-clack of slow, measured footsteps on concrete as the figure walks slowly toward them. One of the women lets out a stifled cry. Sally grabs her boy, as do a couple of other mothers.
It's the monster! It's the monster!
Another woman lets out a wail, and the people fall back in a group staring toward the darkness and the approaching figure. The people stand in the shadows watching. Don Martin joins them, carrying a shotgun. He holds it up.
We may need this.
A shotgun? No. Will anybody think a thought around here? Will you people wise up? What good would a shotgun do against...
The dark figure continues to walk toward them as the people stand there, fearful, mothers clutching children, men standing in front of their wives.
No more talk, Steve. You're gonna talk us into a grave. You'd let whatever's out there walk right over us, wouldn't you? Well, some of us won't.
Charlie swings around, raises the gun, and suddenly pulls the trigger. The sound of the shot explodes in the stillness. The figure suddenly lets out a small cry, stumbles forward onto his knees, and then falls forward on his face. Don, Charlie, and Steve race forward to him. Steve is there first and turns the man over. The crowd gathers around them.
It's Pete Van Horn. Pete Van Horn. He was just gonna go over to the next block to see if the power was on.
You killed him, Charlie. You shot him dead.
But I didn't know who he was. I simply didn't know who he was. He comes walking out of the darkness. How am I supposed to know who he was? Steve, you know why I shot. How was I supposed to know it was a monster or something? We're all scared of the same thing. I was just trying to protect my home, that's all. Look, all of you. That's all I was trying to do. I didn't know it was somebody we knew. I didn't know.
There's a sudden hush, and then an intake of breath in the group. Across the street, all the lights go on in one of the houses.
Charlie. Charlie. The lights just went on in your house. Why did the lights just go on?
What about it, Charlie? How come you're the only one with lights now?
That's what I'd like to know.
Pausing, they all stare toward Charlie.
You were so quick to kill Charlie, and you were so quick to tell us who we had to be careful of. Well, maybe you had to kill. Maybe Pete there was trying to tell us something. Maybe he'd found out something and came back to tell us who there was amongst us we should watch out for.
Charlie backs away from the group, his eyes wide with fright.
No, it's nothing of the sort. I don't know why the lights are on. I swear I don't. Somebody's pulling a gag or something.
He bumps against Steve, who grabs him and whirls him around.
A gag? A gag? Charlie, there's a dead man on the sidewalk and you killed him. Does this thing look like a gag to you?
Charlie breaks away and screams as he runs toward his house.
No, please.
A man breaks away from the crowd to chase Charlie. As the man tackles him and lands on top of him, the other people start to run toward them. Charlie gets up, breaks away from the other man's grasp, and lands a couple of desperate punches that push the man aside. Then he forces his way, fighting through the crowd, and jumps up on his front porch. Charlie is on his porch as a rock thrown from the group smashes a window beside him. The broken glass flying past him, a couple of pieces cut him. He stands there, perspiring, rumpled, blood running down from a cut on the cheek. His wife breaks away from the group to throw herself into his arms. He buries his face against her. We can see the crowd converging on the porch.
It must have been him.
He's the one. We gotta get Charlie.
Another rock lands on the porch. Charlie pushes his wife behind him, facing the group.
Look, I swear to you, it isn't me. But I do know who it is. I swear to you, I do know who it is. I know who the monster is here. I know who it is that doesn't belong. I swear to you, I know. All right, Charlie, let's hear it. It's.
Go ahead, Charlie.
It's the kid. It's Tommy. He's the one.
There's a gasp from the crowd as we see Sally holding the boy. Tommy at first doesn't understand, and then, realizing the eyes are all on him, buries his face against his mother.
That's crazy. He's only a boy. But he knew. He was the only one. He told us all about it. Well, how did he know? How could he have known? How could